Preston, Al, and Cameron for being here tonight. Really, I mean, for all of us eccentrics, we are thoroughly pleased to hear about the Rainbow Project, the Philadelphia Experiment, the Phoenix Project, all that good stuff. And so I guess you can all take it the way you want, you know, as one after another, while he puts on his sunglasses. And this is really, I think, a memorable event. And so you guys can take on the project, and thanks for being here.
Go ahead, John. Preston, why don't you start? All right. Well, we're here tonight. We have with us Mr. Bielek, who is from the Eldridge for the Philadelphia Experiment, the older fellow that went back to 43. We also have with us Mr. Cameron, who is also off the Eldridge. Two of the craziest people in the world. Now, compliment.
They're not so crazy, they survived.
We're here at the auspices of the, what's it, Galuppi?
Yeah, Filippo Galuppi.
Galuppi brothers.
Right.
We're here in this nice, beautiful home in Blue Point. This home has to be at least $250,000.
I hope so. Three-quarter.
$750,000, whatever. And I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Why don't you start with what Montauk was about, how it tied into the Philadelphia Experiment.
A brief synopsis, maybe, of the...
Okay, first of all, I got to find the
However, you want to start with Philadelphia and then go to however you want.
How it ties in.
I first have to find the power cord. I got a place to plug this power cord and you start up the tape recorder.
Go.
There, plugged in. All right, way back when. Let's start with the Phoenix Project. Phoenix Project is a carry-on from the Philadelphia Experiment. That was a...
Can you hear them? Can you hear them okay?
That was a silly little project that the Navy did back in the 30s and the 40s, attempting to make a battleship invisible. They wanted to make an aircraft carrier invisible. They threw the switch one eventful day, and the ship went into hyperspace, caused all sorts of problems to the people on the boat. The Navy said the thing's a huge failure, a huge success, but it's also a huge failure, and they shelved it. In about 47, it was decided, you know, the government can't leave this thing alone. They got a wild effect that they wanted to study. So in 47, they reopened it and started up with what we came later to know as the Phoenix Project. It was originally the Rainbow Project. It was moved to Brookhaven National Laboratory, and Dr. von Neumann and all his associates, this was long before any of us were involved in it, started to replicate this thing. Out of the Phoenix 1, the early project, came the stealth technology, which I cannot talk about. You know, either of these two guys can talk about the stealth technology, but I cannot talk about it because of my job. And also came out all sorts of energetic little toys, such as radiosondes. What is a radiosonde? Well, if you remember all back when we were kids, we saw these little white plastic boxes that had a white bottle hanging down on it, but they connected to a little red parachute, filled up a balloon with helium, connected the whole thing up in the atmosphere at once. The government told us, hey, this thing is a weather data package. It has a temperature sensor, has a humidity sensor, and it has a pressure sensor in it. And this thing will ultimately transmit temperature data, humidity data, temperature data, reference data. And the switching was controlled by the barometric pressure at the height by what they call the baro switch. This thing used a very unusual type of pulse modulation. In most cases, they used a CW, continuous wave oscillator, and pulsed the thing off. The pulse was pulsing it off. This turned out to be a very efficient conversion of electrical energy to etheric energy. Now, I very recently started collecting radiosondes. I don't know why, but I did. I walked in with a radio sound, and one of the associates at Space-Time Laboratory says, things are a weather control device. So, of course, that piqued my interest. I'd already known that the humidity sensor was terrible. Its accuracy was a lot to be desired. I'd known the temperature sensor was terrible, and its accuracy had a lot to be desired. And the other unusual thing that I wondered about is, yeah, I can get all the radio sounds I want. I've never, ever seen a receiver for them. So we first did a quote-unquote psychic reading. The Space-Time Laboratories, everybody uses CAD, computer-aided designs. At Space-Time Laboratories, we use psychic-aided designs. So we had a number of different psychics read on the radio sounds. Weather control device, doorbuster, orgone enhancer. That's the readings that came through. So I got very interested, and I started to ask around about radio sounds. The next thing I found out by word of mouth is these things were designed at Brookhaven National Laboratories up in Long Island, New York, just up the road from this place. And I started to talk to people I know at Brookhaven. Ran across a retired gentleman from Brookhaven who wishes to remain nameless, so I won't name him. He'll stay anonymous. He told me that the design was originally done by a character by the name of Wilhelm Reich. Of course, that piqued my interest even more. Wilhelm Reich. The story goes that in about 47, Mr. Reich handed the U.S. government a weather control device, a little package that would do door busting. He felt that if he could reduce the amount of door and increase the orgone in the storm wouldn't be violent, it wouldn't have winds, and it wouldn't do the damage. It would be a less violent storm.
What is the DOR?
Deadly orgone. Dead orgone. That's the bad stuff.
And where does that come from?
No one really knows where it comes from. I've heard a number of theories. Well, essentially, orgone can be considered like life energy, energy from life forces, energy from living beings. Dead orgone is the same type of energy but dead. It doesn't have any life in it. It has a tendency to decrease life functions. It reduces life functions. So the government took this little widget that Mr. Reich handed them. He told them, put it on a balloon, send it up. Of course, they put a parachute on it because they didn't want the thing coming down with a big, loud, crashing bang through somebody's skylight, and the government gets sued for all sorts of money. And they send the thing up into a bad storm, and it gets reduced in intensity tremendously. So the government goes back to Reich and says, hey, we like the thing. So they launch another part of the Phoenix project where they designed these radio sounds. This is almost like a little subsection of this, by the way, this story. Now, of course, I dug further and further into it. As I already noted, I talked of the receiver. There are instances where we know they launch these things from every boat at sea, every airport, every weather station. They launch them from planes. At one point in the 50s, there must have been maybe 200 to 500 of these things launched every day. The radio range, being a radio every day. The radio range, being a radio person, I can tell you about that, I checked it. The radio range on these transmitters, even up in the air, maybe is 100 miles. So that means when they launch one of these frequencies, there has to be a receiver close by. They're going to send up a data transmitter and not have, they have to have a receiver. That means if they're sending 200 or more of these things up each day, it's got to be one pile of receivers. These receivers should be very common. Now, I happen to be a receiver collector. I have over 100 receivers in my personal collection of receivers. I have never seen a radio sound receiver. I've heard them, but I've never seen one. I got almost every other receiver